All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. This era's version of the Toronto Blue Jays should be filed under the category of the next big thing that never was. All right, in 2020, it was the Young Jays that got to the playoffs only to be swept in the wild card round, courtesy of the Tampa Bay Rays. But even though the Jays were one and done, the thought was, you know what? Getting to the postseason, getting that postseason experience for this young group was only going to be the tip of the iceberg. We saw Toronto win 91 games in 2021, but no trip to the postseason as they just missed out. Okay. We saw them win 92 games in 2022, only to be swept in the wild card round, courtesy of the Seattle Mariners, a Mariners team that hadn't made the playoffs, Mariners franchise rather, since 2001. Okay. Last year, Toronto once again was a wild card. This time they got swept courtesy of the Minnesota Twins, a Twins franchise that hadn't won a postseason series since in 2003, 2002 rather, excuse me. So you look at this year's Blue Jays team. All right, they got a payroll north of 200 million, and right now the only thing that they've got to show for it is that they're in last place in the American League East, and they have a very frustrated fan base with this club. You look at it today, and I mean, today was a good old fashioned butt kicking for Toronto at her home, courtesy of the Tampa Bay Rays, 13 love. Right now, you have a Toronto team that is 15 games out of first place in the AL East. They are in last place in that division. They're not catching Baltimore. Okay, that's a given. On top of that, we're talking about a club that is also 9.5 games behind the Kansas City Royals for the final wild card spot in the American League. That ain't happening either. Why? Because we're talking about a Jays team right now that's 46 and 56. Just for them to get to 500 to end the season, they've got to go 35 and 25 the rest of the way. What have we seen so far this season that would make you believe the Jays would even win 35 out of their next 60 games, more or less go out there and be a playoff team? You look at it, this team, to me, I think they have lacked effort all season long. They have also lacked chemistry. And this lack of effort or lack thereof, it's one of those where things like this, they get front office personnel fired. They also get managers fired, and they also get guys traded. And you look at, the guys in the front office, President Mark Shapiro, General Manager Ross Atkins, and Manager John Schneider. For me, first and foremost, I would be hard pressed to think that John Schneider is going to be back after this disappointing year for the Jays. That's number one. Number two, we're already hearing the Fire Atkins chants, around Rogers Center for this Blue Jays team. I don't think he comes back either. And then there's also going to be questions about personnel for this club going forward because they've been so disappointing. You look at it, I mean, it's one of those where you can take your pick. Toronto has underperformed hitting wise. They've also underperformed with their pitching, and they have some big time contracts on this team attached to guys who simply have not come through. Bo Bichette's on the contract for one more year with the Blue Jays. Do they part with him? You look at a guy like Vlad Guerrero, he's going to be a free agent after next season as well. Toronto has said they want Vlad, to be there. We got to wait and see. But nonetheless, you can go right up and down this lineup as far as guys who aren't taking care of the business. Vlad has had a solid season at the plate for the Jays so far this season. He's hitting 296 with 18 home runs and 62 runs batted in. But there's been a lot of disappointment with this club. in the lineup. There's also been a lot of disappointment with this pitching staff as well. And when it's all said and done, we've got a Toronto team that, for my money, is the most underachieving and the most disappointing team in Major League Baseball this season. So the changes have to be coming, okay? Because for me, there's too much talent on this team for them to be underperforming like this. And you could just take your pick as far as what aspect of the game of baseball have the Blue Jays underperformed at the most this season. But it's one of those, the trade deadline's right around the corner. This Blue Jays team is not going anyplace. They need to be sellers. I do expect wholesale changes in the offseason for Toronto. I think it's going to start in the front office position. I think it's going to start with the managerial position as well. And I think it's going to be a trickle down effect to this roster because there is no way in the world that you can bring this team back as is next season and expect and basically tell your fan base, hey, you know what? We're serious about being contenders because this team is not. I look at this team, their core, if you will, they've never lived up to the standards or to the expectations, should I say, is a better word. And then on top of that, it's never been that sense of urgency. It's like it's always, oh, we'll get them tomorrow type thing. And guess what? You keep getting to the postseason. They got to the postseason 3 out of the last 4 years. This this team still hasn't even won a game. Okay, because they got swept in 2020 in the wild card round, swept in 2022 in the wild card round, swept last year in the wild card round. So it's one of those things there. Where's that sense of urgency? And it ain't coming from this team. You look at the Yankees, I know they've taken a step back, but they're still right there with Baltimore. And Baltimore has a young core that they are building and developing. And you look at what it has gotten them so far as they are in first place in this division. The Boston Red Sox have retooled and they've overachieved for what it's worth. But the Red Sox are in the midst of a play of getting a wild card spot. And then even the Tampa Bay Rays, and this is a down year for the Rays for their standards, they still have found a way to be a game over 500 at this point of the season. Then you look at Toronto. Toronto's talent in this division is second to none, but they simply don't go out there on a day-to-day basis or a night-to-night basis and get the job done. And when it's all said and done, this is why we have a team here in late July that is so far out of things. And this is why you have a frustrated fan base. And the fans in Toronto have every right to be frustrated with this team. But nonetheless, the trade deadline is right around the corner. There's no way that the Toronto Blue Jays can sit back and say, you know what, we're cool with this and we're going to keep it as it is. They've got to be sellers. They've got to start looking towards the future because your present ain't that good, because your present has simply underachieved. Like I said before, hands down, in my opinion, the most underachieving team in baseball this season has to be the Toronto Blue Jays, and it's second place ain't even close. 10 games under 500 with this roster, 15 games out of first place, 9 games out of the final wild card. It's been a bitter disappointment. When will the bleeding stop for the Jays? We simply don't know, but nonetheless, they can't keep going at the route that they are and expect to have some success. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.